Cara Braciale is an artist and educator based in Northern Virginia. She teaches at the Corcoran School of Arts and Design at George Washington University. She has exhibited her work in Washington, D.C., Regina Rex Gallery in New York. Her work has been included in the inaugural Museum of Contemporary Art, former Arlington Arts Center, Biennial exhibition, Assembly in 2019. She has work on view in the 2024 Made in Virginia Biennial at the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art. And she's been a fellow at the Virginia Center for Creative Arts and Vermont Studio Center, and recently participated in the 2024 edition of Electronic Textiles Camp hosted by Prairie Rond Residency. Would you all welcome up Cara?
Thank you, Corey, for that very up to the minute bio. Really grateful to be here with you guys today, and particularly grateful to the artists for making this fantastic occasion to be together, and I'm excited to get to see your work in person. That was what I was most excited about today. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about myself and my art practice, which is pretty intertwined with my teaching, I would say, and my research, which maybe once upon a time we'd also have called influences on my work. So that's going to be the general format of this, is things I look at and think about, things that I make, and the opportunities and experiences that I like to develop for my students. So thank you for having me. So I'm just going to dive right in. My work is really often informed by textiles and their historical contexts, and I have been, in recent years, very interested in this group coming out of Austria in the early 20th century called the Wiener Werkstätte, or the Vienna Workshop, and I became very interested in this group of artists coming together out of the Vienna Secession movement because they were organizing themselves to kind of create opportunities in the world for artists and place their work in the world, not just in galleries and museums. Like, that wasn't the concept. It was that, it should be for everyone and everywhere. And this group also included, in the early 20th century, in Vienna, many, many women in its ranks as artists and designers. So I was very interested in researching this group of artists, and it took me to Austria eventually, which I will get to, but one of the reasons why I liked I spent a lot of time looking at images of textiles, so much time. And one of the things that interested me about the kind of work that these artists were making, particularly on their textiles, was that they were making kind of images, pictures of methods of making, is how I would see it, but also maybe kind of magnifying or zooming in to textile works. It's kind of, a form of abstraction. So I felt this kinship with the way they were working, and I will just give you an example of what I mean by this. So I had showed you back here this image by Lotte Fremme-Vogler. It's called Mauerblümchen, or Wallflower. And if you look at this, this is a draft for a weaving, right? This is 8-shaft weaving, or 6-shaft weaving, actually. But you can see here these kind of steps that represent threads. And if I put them side by side, you'll see that actually in the specificity of that print that Lotte Fremme-Vogler designed kind of refers to those thread steps, right? Takes out the individual threads themselves, but you still see that reference to like a woven structure. So that really interested me, this kind of like magnification and this abstraction. Similarly, I really love this artist, Klara Poznanski. Not a lot is known about what happened to this artist after World War II, right? After the Anschluss and the annexation of Austria by the Third Reich, but her work endures, And what interested me about Clara is also this kind of like zooming in. So you see, this is a woven pattern, that's clear. Here's another kind of some other colorways. But you can see it's a screen printed fabric, but this weave is kind of opened up, right? So you're sort of looking at the spaces between and behind the woven threads. And that really interested me because it's sort of like magnification. It's an entryway into abstraction, but also a pop gesture. And also, I'll just point out that you can kind of see this ombre in the background of this work. And that was a very particular technique that was developed by the Wiener Werkstätte print technicians and then lost for, I would say until maybe like 10 years ago. And I'll show you the person who figured out how to recreate it in a second. But so this is a painting that I made that you can see was really influenced by the kind of that open weave. And this is from a series called Nulls and Voids. And it relates to older work of mine in various ways structurally. But one of the things, I think you can see that space between and behind and the grid, the actual weaving that is depicted is a translation of text that says nulls and voids. The over and under comes from the zeros and ones of binary code. But I'll show you here that this was actually the basis of it is a screen print. So also similar to how the Wiener Werkstätte artists were working. And this is like the basic screen with that grid. And then I made these nulls or zeros in different fonts that I blew up and enlarged, and I would cut them out, and I would put them in between the screen and the canvas before I made the print to make these voids. So that I would then work back into in paintings. And this person, I will just show you really quickly, Ute Huber-Leyer, is the person who discovered how to recreate that ombre technique of screen printing. And I'll get back to why these two wonderful people are so cool. But I am in Austria here, working on these screen prints, and part of the reason why I'm in Austria, one, because I'm chasing these artists, trying to find out more, trying to learn more about the work of the Wiener Werkstätte. So this is actually at this institution called Die Angewandte, or the University of Applied Arts in Austria, which is where a lot in the kind of associated museum is the archives of the Wiener Werkstätte, and then also a lot of the old equipment was still housed at this school, and then some of the textile fragments and samples. So here I am working on my piece, but the reason why I got there in the first place was because of making an experience for students. So to bring students to Austria to learn. So I'll go into that. So this is another example of a painting from that Nulls and Voids series. And really, in terms of just thinking about space and painting and entries into abstraction and constructing a painting, I'm, very interested in these kind of spatial flips. Again, said magnification, picturing making, as I talked about before. So like the image of a brushstroke as opposed to the indexical brushstroke, like the mark of a brushstroke. That's sort of everything that I'm thinking about in these paintings. But it was teaching that got me to Austria. So once upon a time, like many artists and people in the world, I've had many jobs, many lives. So before I started teaching, I actually, my main job was as a software developer. And so I had this kind of background in project management and coding, and that, along with other things, did lead me into teaching, but it didn't exactly come into my work until later because it was, my day job. I kept these things kind of separate. But they start to kind of connect, I think, productively. So when I used to live in Boston and teach at Northeastern University, and I developed this summer study abroad for students. called Textiles and Coding, and it brought us to Austria. One, because of the Wiener Werkstätte, and two, because of an institution called Ars Electronica in Linz, Austria. So I'm just going to show you here, these are some examples of early student work, for the first year of the program. Large format, repeat prints made by students in the summer in Austria. And then students would go, our final project for the creative coding class that I taught in the first year, we would go to Ars Electronica, and students would program the facade of the building. So Ars Electronica in Linz is it's the first museum that's dedicated to art and technology, and they program the Ars Electronica Festival every September, and they have the pre-Ars Electronica, and they're always kind of thinking at the edge of really technology, but also the interface of art and tech. And my students collaborate with Future Lab, which is the research arm of Ars Electronica, to develop these programs that run at the end of our workshop publicly on the facade of the building, which is a very low resolution LED screen. And so what you're looking at here is work, again, from the first year that we did it. It's called Digital Fishbowl, and it was work by students that now permanently can be played on the facade. So if you ever go to Linz, Austria, and I hope everyone can make it there someday, lovely town, you can download an app, and everyone who's there can play the facade. So you can choose what program you want to run, and this is one of them now, made by students. Another student project that came out of the Wiener Werkstätte research was an exhibition at the Textile Museum in Washington, D.C. So there is, within the Textile Museum, a pattern book from the Wiener Werkstätte, and the curators there were doing an exhibition of textile fragments from the Wiener Werkstätte and asked me to bring in students to make work around this to be included at the Textile Museum. So this is some examples of student work that was shown at the Textile Museum. So you can see these textile fragments here, and then paintings that were made kind of in response, sculptural work and painted work that was also installed at the museum. So I also want to talk to you, this is now my evangelical moment, about the Index of American Design. So, as I said at the beginning, I look at a lot of pictures of textiles. I love them. This is a painting by the artist Ruth Barnes for the Index of American Design, and it's just one of the very beautiful works that I think, if you encounter them, are really very strange and wonderful because they're in the collection of the National Gallery of Art. So the Index of American Design is 18,000 plus minus drawings that were made as part of the Federal Art Project during the WPA. So this is an example of a shaker textile. It's a painting, it's not the actual textile. So if you, like me, go to museums and Google textiles, or search textiles, you might be surprised to find in the National Gallery like thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures of paintings of textiles. And I was super curious about what these were. So the Federal Art Project program ran between 1935 and 1942, and the index was under that, the auspices of that. And the goal of the Index of American Design was to inscribe a material visual history of American design objects, and the goal was to make those records accessible to the public. And the index employed over 400 artists during the time that it was active, and there were offices for the index in every state that existed. during that time. So there was a Virginia index office, there's a New York index office, there's a Maine index office, and all of these, artists who were hired to work would go to the office and make these drawings of watercolors or drawings. And this is one of my favorite index artists, Amelia Tuccio. I continue to try and find out what happened to this person because her kind of like graphite mastery really always blows me away. But I was very interested in how, again, if I go back to my interest in the Wiener Werkstatt at the beginning, I was interested in the index as a way that it's an institution that supported artistic production. And it was conceived of by two women, so Ruth Reeves, who was an artist and textile designer in New York, and Ramona Javits, who was an artist and actually a librarian at the New York Public Library, who at the time was the curator of the pictures collection. So if you can imagine in 1930, libraries would have huge collections of photographs for people as like references. There were no, there's no like Google image search, right? So this is how people could access images from, all over the world. It was a resource. And to me, I think it blows my mind. I don't know, like if you think about a federally funded drawing program today, it seems kind of, to me, like super radical, right? So I love that about it. But also what interested me as an educator is that there's an embedded drawing curriculum. And for me, this became very useful for students. So we're very lucky where I teach that we can go to the National Gallery very easily. It's a walk from our studio classroom. It's a huge, it's a luxury and a privilege. And so we're able to go see these drawings in person, but I ask my drawing students if you were going to make work include an object in the index now, what would you include? It's been made for incredibly generative conversations over the past, I think I started this 2 years ago. So this idea of like a speculative index, if we were gonna update this, like what does it mean? What does American design mean? The idea of American design, like what do you even kind of conceive of? And then what should be included? And what's the material? How is it manufactured? Does it have to be handmade? All of these things. These have been really interesting questions, and also a way to kind of understand, kind of generationally a little bit like where people's heads are at too. So the index continues to be a really potent area of interest for me and also very helpful in terms of teaching. I'm actually developing a class just on the index for next spring. And I'm gonna just talk about a couple more recent works of mine and then talk about my experience during the show. So a recent work that I completed last year was a commission from the City of Falls Church, Virginia, which is actually where I live. And bless you. Thinking about the index of American design has kept me thinking about archiving and how archiving and this active preservation is a really direct way to reframe the ordinary. So this is it's a vinyl utility box wrap, but the images on it come from found textiles from my local thrift store, which is just downstairs from my studio. So I'll go into the thrift store and, I'm looking around, and often I find lots of really beautiful heirlooms that have been handmade and saved, but are now here in these bins, right? And I'm always really interested about, of course, who made them. That information isn't available to me anymore, and why someone saved them, and then why no one wanted it in their home anymore, or how it ended up there. And more often than not, I find like I need to save it myself. And for me, each textile that I've collected, and I have so many now, really captures like the passage of time, right? Just based on kind of when it looks like something might have been made, although sometimes it's hard to tell based on the technique, but also it's kind of this visual repository of knowledge and skill, right? Like this is an archive of someone's time and also technical skill. And that, as an artist, interests me. So for this piece, I started with this idea of kind of looking at all of these things that are kind of like typologically similar, right? But also very individual. And I immediately thought of W.A. Bentley's snow crystals photographs. So that was my first kind of point of departure in thinking about this piece. And I also thought about the biannical cyanotypes of Anna Atkins. So Anna Atkins made the very first book of photography with her cyanotypes of plant forms, and really was like a pioneer of photography in cyanotype. So for me, these were two kind of ways to think about how to look at something from kind of a archiving or typological study, taking that approach, and then also really kind of getting at like the specificity of each object. So I made for this piece, like, I don't even know how many hundreds of different cyanotypes over a period of months, thinking that they would come together as a collection, but these separate documents. And then over time, I realized, though, I really like looking at these individual moments. And for each of these works, I'm documenting the variations in the, I know the date, I know the kind of conditions of their making, like I've documented what it was like that day, and then of course like the time of the exposure for each of these pieces. So they're really tethered to a moment in time for me, but they also, they're very different, and it turned out that they really needed to come together as a collection all at once, which is not at all how I planned it. But these are just some of the kind of prelude research pieces that I made. And they're all different scales, very hard to tell scale. So like this is actually quite a large textile that looks like it could be, 6 inches by 6 inches, but it's over probably closer to like 18 inches. So when I made ultimately the cyanotype that ends up as the vinyl wrap, it's almost 1-to-1 scale. So they're like these very huge, long prints that are not all of my collection, but much of the collections at once. Here's one, and here's another. And they're made very quickly. So this one was the one that is on the box, and the end is made in about 2.5 minutes on a day in May. And where it was made is about 2 blocks from where it ended up. So it's like this very kind of hyper-local moment. Here's a close-up of the vinyl, and here it is installed. And so the correspondence between the actual objects is pretty direct, which is something that I'm interested in as well. The last piece that I'm going to talk to you about was also made last year. It's a piece that I exhibited at the Virginia Museum of Contemporary Art Biennial. Corey mentioned that, and it's called Sigma, which is not a reference to, like, it's not the Gen Z term, but it's actually a reference to the summation function in a spreadsheet. So, if you have a spreadsheet column and you want to sum it, you choose that sigma. So my father had passed away unexpectedly in 2023, and he, at the time, hadn't retired from the University of Virginia, where he taught he did his research. He was an immunologist, and he conducted his research and taught for over 30 years, but he hadn't gotten around to retiring. And as his kind of geographically closest child, I was the one who went to go pack up his office. And when I walked in, I was very struck by, he had, of course, all of his, reference books and, gifts that he'd been given over the years and pictures with students and colleagues. But at the very top of the bookshelves, in chronological order, were all the dissertations of the students that he had mentored. And it really struck me that this was like, they were in pride of place. That was like his most proud body of work. And at his house, in the closet, were all of the blue shirts that were his uniform for his whole life, you can see. And so when I kind of made this piece, I really thought about it as kind of like a collaboration with my dad, finally, though he was a scientist and I'm an artist, comes together. So I would say like the actions that I undertook, the folding and the stacking and kind of the binding things together are really about an index of mourning. And they're very common actions, like if you've ever experienced a loss and had to kind of attend to what is happening after. This is all very common. So everything that's included in this, the shirts and the books and the belts are really the ephemera of everyday life, but a specific life. And I also sort of would say that, I call this a portrait, and I really think of the materials themselves as holding on to these kind of invisible connections that still persist between and beyond. So, like a researcher and his questions, teachers to their students, or parent to a child. That's the last piece that I'm gonna talk about, my work. And I want to talk about this show and jurying it. So congratulations again to all the artists who are included. It's really a privilege and an honor to get to look at your work, and most exciting to see it in person. And I think when it comes to jurying, it's very difficult to understand work on a screen. I find that all the time. It's like so hard to understand what something is, at this scale, even at this scale. So probably the most important question or the most important kind of like guiding principle for me was curiosity about seeing this work in person. Like that, it's kind of like, I need to understand that. I want to see more of that. And so that's how I went about this. Just a curiosity about seeing the work in real life and being present with it. And I feel like that paid off for me. So I think broadly speaking, thinking about the work that was submitted and what you see here, and this is also, it's my own headspace, but a really insistent engagement with materiality in the works is what stands out to me. In teaching, I think my fundamental question is like, why this material? That's maybe like the first question. Why this material? Or is this the best material through which to translate this idea? Because, for me, my perspective on art is it is an idea translated into an object, or a set of ideas, or an idea that's translated into a performance or an event, but there's this active translation. And so, in your active translation, are you being as kind of economic and direct as you can? And I think that's something that really struck me about the works that are here. And I also think, to me, there's something, this maybe it's a little bit of a detour, but when I think about the anxiety around, for instance, AI image making and artists, I don't particularly feel anxiety about it, because I feel very strongly that artists stake out, like we Our territory is our ongoing relationship to an embodied intelligence and the material world. So that's something else that it feels very present to me here, is like things that insist on you being with them. So it doesn't, like image is of course meaningful, but it's not everything. And that's something, this insistence upon physical presence is something that really also drew me to these works. So thank you very much, Corey, for this opportunity. Thank you all for making this opportunity for me to come talk to you. And congratulations again to all of the artists. Really nice work.
Carrie, are you able to hang around for a while if people have any questions?
Oh, yeah, of course.
If y'all have any questions for Kara afterwards, you can chat with her. All right. If you're an artist in the exhibition, would you raise your hand? I know there's a couple. Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. I just wanted to announce the winner of the Grand Prize Award is Emily Springer. My Dream for You. Is Emily here? Emily's not here. It's the quilted piece hanging up back here, the large quilted piece. Oh, bummer, Emily's not here. Well, we'll get in touch with her, but okay, thank you all so much for being here. That's the end of the talk today. Hang around for a while, check out the other exhibitions. Make sure you vote for the People's Choice Award for this exhibition and the Betty Awards. You can do that up at the front desk. There's ballots up there, so thanks.